Chapter 51. Which girl hadn't fallen in love with all the wrong bastards when they were young? You are listening at NovelFull.audio. The cleric was actually quite capable. He was able to rescue the warrior from death's grip in such a dire situation. Despite having the strength of an entire party, nobody would be able to fight against a wild boss like this using conventional means. The party that arrived had either made serious preparations, or they're outright stupid. Apparently, these guys came with a plan. They lured the armored giant tortoise to a specific spot near the hot spring, where a group of man-sized rocks stood. These rocks formed a perfect camping spot for at least 5 players. As long as the warrior stood still in between these rocks, the monster's underbelly would be stuck between the rocks, exposing it to attacks from ranged players. However, the boss was not entirely stuck. As soon as the warrior moved away from the group of rocks, the armored giant tortoise would follow suit. This would mean the annihilation of the entire party. Yi Cai had originally thought of fighting the armored giant tortoise using the same method. But OL-3 was not a player. When it was hungry, its attack damage and aggro value would be halved. If Yi Cai fed OL-3 at that moment, taunt will be interrupted. This would cause the armored giant tortoise to phase out of combat status or shift its aggro. This was why Yi Cai chose to kite the boss instead. However, with the strength and cooperation of a party, Yi Cai's assailants would be able to defeat the armored giant tortoise that had 8% of its HP left within an hour. Yi Cai laid silently not far from their location. Thanks to her reflexes, she was able to avoid suffering any damage. As one of the most wanted person in her past life, Yi Cai pushed herself to the extreme in order to survive. Her action of dodging the attack from the rogue was a very rare skill in Fate. The skill was dubbed Superior Dodge. Superior Dodge was not a skill that can be learned from NPCs. It was a result of a player's experience in combat. Despite appearing to be only a slight shift of position, it requires a lot of skill to pull off successfully. When was the best time to dodge? How to dodge a physical attack? How could a magical attack be dodged? How to achieve the highest efficiency of dodging with the slightest amount of movement? How does one increase their chances of dodging an attack? Yi Cai was able to find the answers to all of these questions after gaining a lot combat experience. Nobody was born a pro. Even the pros were once newbies. Yi Cai discovered superior dodging by chance. But she was very perceptive when it came to gaming. She was able to seize that exact moment and store it into her brain. She then fought in the arena for months to hone her skills. She pressed on despite death after death and spent tens of thousands of gold to repair her damaged equipment. She finally mastered her skill in a fight for her life against other players. Yi Cai was reminded of her superior dodging when she was previously ambushed by the rogue from the western continent. At first, she was not able to use it successfully as she was not used to her body that was 10 years younger. She was no longer able to adapt to the tempo and she was troubled by her complete change in class. She trained day and night in Red Lake City's arena to reacquire her long-lost skill. As the basics were already ingrained in her mind, she was able to reacquire the skill. But with little combat experience, Yi Cai had not completely mastered superior dodging. It was out of sheer luck that she pulled it off against Lazy Blue and the warrior. The party did not hide their names. Yi Cai was able to see their name while lying on the ground. The warrior's name was Potato Eating Dace, while the sorcerer was Mu Qing, and the cleric's name was Glistening Snow. The group stood not far from Yi Cai, dealing blows after blows to the armored giant tortoise while chatting with each other. Glistening Snow, are you sure that it's Gongziyu? Asked Potato Eating Dace while staring at Yi Cai's corpse with disbelief. Of course she is. I've heard about her from someone from Steel-Blooded Battle Spear and had seen her performance in the video. I recognize that panther. She's definitely Gongziyu. Lazy Blue nodded. Isn't Gongziyu a little too fragile? She died just like that. Potato Eating Days still could not believe his eyes. You're not the one who killed her. It was the armored giant tortoise. You really think that she's weak? Didn't you see her reaction when I tried to sneak up on her? She disappeared before I could blink, said Lazy Blue, reminiscing the moment when he was about to cast staggering blow on Yi Si. He shook his head with creased eyebrows. Enough. Lazy Blue, beware of our surroundings. Take her out as soon as she revives. Don't miss the 5 seconds window where she is weakened upon respawning. The cleric, Mu Qing, interrupted the conversation. Yeah. Don't worry, I got this. After all, I'm one of the best in the Tang dynasty. Lazy Blue waved his hand dismissively at Mu Qing. Mu Qing immediately turned quiet. Yi Si grimaced. They were players from the Tang Dynasty Guild. She had thought that she would be able to avoid certain things after her reincarnation. But she was wrong. The goddess of fate would not let her off the hook that easily. She would still run into certain people that she had no intention of ever meeting again. She took a deep breath and remembered the things that she had intended to forget. There was once a saying. Which girl hadn't fallen in love with all the wrong bastards when they were young? Yi Si had the misfortune of falling in love with the wrong person. She had always been cold and detached. She even expected herself to be single until she died. She had not expected to fall in love. But she did. And her naive self expected her love to have a happy ending just like in a typical romance movie. However, her romance brought her nothing but woe and sorrow. She had always thought that everything was worth sacrificing if it was for love. Although she was able to foresee the beginning of their relationship, but the ending was not something she expected. She gave her all to that man. But he parted his way with her after enjoying the glory she brought him with a simple apology. The reason was a curt, "We just don't suit each other." All those memories felt so distant. She used to feel that the entire world owed her everything. She took vengeance on everybody who ever loved and cared about her. In the end, she had no one left. The memory felt like a dream. It felt stupid. Yi Si looked up into the sky. She tried to remember that man's face. She tried and failed. Wandering Cloud says that he'll be here soon, said Glistening Snow all of a sudden. The group's spirit soared after the heard Wandering Cloud's name. Yi Si's mind went blank after hearing the name. She already had a bad feeling after learning that the players were from Tang Dynasty. An unsettling chill crept up her limbs when she heard the name Wandering Cloud. Slow down, we must wait for Wandering Cloud, said Mu Qing. To get that shield, he bought information from the black market for 200,000 renminbi. The party members nodded. The corner of Yi Si's mouth twitched. It was all for that shield. It was that particular shield on Wandering Cloud's hand that had attracted Yi Si to him. As the first person to obtain that shield, he was of course an extraordinary person. She had never thought that he got that shield from this place. With each passing second, Yi Si was able to slowly regain her composure. Her wandering thoughts came back to the reality. She peeked at the amount of HP the armored giant tortoise had left. It was already under 2%. Should she take them out right now? Or should she strike when Wandering Cloud arrived? Just as Yi Si was hesitating, a voice she knew so well that it was almost unfamiliar rang in her ears. Damn, without the invisible potion, I wouldn't have made it here. Yi Si finally understood how the party was able to make their way to Winter's Hot Spring. It was through the help of novice invisible potions. The potion itself is not cheap. Each of them could only last 1 minute. For the 5 of them to arrive at this spot, they must have invested a lot. Cloud, you're here. Hurry up. You risk missing the loot, said Glistening Snow. Wandering Cloud joined the battle. He casted a glance at Yi Si who was lying on the ground and asked, so this is Gong Ziyu. The party members nodded. Not bad, you've defeated her. Wandering Cloud smiled at his men. We did no such thing. Lazy Blue mumbled. He was the one who had fought directly against Yi Si. He knew her strength but he was too afraid to speak loudly. Wandering Cloud did not hear Lazy Blue's words, and continued asking, she was afraid to respawn after being killed by you guys. Yeah, she might be good in PvE, but her PvP skills sucks. I guess she was afraid that we would kill her again. So she stayed like that. Glistening Snow told a lie. Wandering Cloud nodded. He then immediately recalled something important. What was the boss's HP before you guys stole it from her? Around 10% I think. Potato, eating Dace's charge pushed her in front of the armored giant tortoise and she was killed by it. Muqing described what they had witnessed truthfully. Enjoyed the chapter? Comment below and tell us what you think. Also feel free to track me down in Volari's Discord server. The boss has added a new channel for Roth discussions. Yay! Cheers! And also, this here my Jimmy's Patreon. If you wanna show your support for Roth, feel free to drop in a few bucks XD. Chapter 52 1 vs 5. Or was it 5 vs 1? You are listening at novelfull.audio. Wandering Cloud quickly realized that something was wrong from Potato eating Dace's words. I thought you guys said that you had defeated her. Why would she just lie there when you guys stole the monster when it has 10% of its HP left? How is that possible? Before he could finish his sentence, Yi Si rose from the ground like a phantom and fired an arrow at Glistening Snow. Yi Si's equipment was superior and a cleric was a soft target. Nobody expected her to suddenly rise and attack. They were not prepared for Yi Si's sudden movement. Glistening Snow was taken out by Yi Si's attacks before he could react. Lazy Blue managed to react and attempted to deliver a staggering blow at Yi Si, but she had already leaped away. Even the arrow that she first shot at Glistening Snow was fired while in mid-air. The party was not new to PK. They immediately counterattacked right after Glistening Snow was taken out. With the exception of Potato, eating Dace who had to hide within the rock formation and maintain the armored giant tortoise's aggro, the other three charged at Yi Si. Muqing began channeling a spell while he moved, while Wandering Cloud charged at Yi Si. Affected by her feelings from her past life, Yi Si did not dare to look him in the eye. She dodged his charge with a slight adjustment and landed on Lazy Blue. Using him as a springboard, Yi Si once again leaped into the air and cast rapid fire on Muqing. Muqing fell lifelessly to the ground after receiving a flurry of critical hits with additional poison damage. After taking out two enemies in one go, Yi Si dashed towards the armored giant tortoise. She cast the Empowered Hunter's Mark at the boss, cast Falcon Protection on herself, and fired a Viper Needle at the boss's eyes. She then cast Decoy on herself. The aggro of the armored giant tortoise on Potato eating Dace was not that high. With Yi Si's rapid attacks, she was able to snatch the aggro away from him. The armored giant tortoise immediately moved away from the rock formation and headed straight for Yi Si. Dace, secure the boss's aggro, shouted Wandering Cloud. But his order was more or less impossible for Potato eating Dace. This was a LVL 40 wild boss that they're talking about. Even if he was able to hold the aggro, he would have easily been killed by the boss. Despite that, Potato eating Dace cast Taunt at the boss. Yi Si, however, was very generous. She fired a decoy at Potato eating Dace, generously transferring all her aggro to the warrior. The armored giant tortoise turned its head towards Potato eating Dace and chomped down on him. With a scream, he fell lifelessly onto the ground. The 5-man party had been reduced to only 2 in less than 30 seconds. Wandering Cloud gritted his teeth. I thought you said she's bad at PvP. The ones who had already died laid there and did not dare to speak a word. Glistening Snow was especially quiet as if he had truly died. Lazy Blue who was still alive paled. He did not expect Gongzi Yu to fake her death for nearly half an hour just beside him. This huntress was truly skillful and bold. Lazy Blue felt like he was outplayed. Not only in terms of skill but in terms of intelligence as well. He was toyed by this huntress called Gongziyu. Lazy Blue was enraged, and he charged straight at Yi Si. Yi Si, on the other hand, darted towards her two remaining opponents, with the armored giant tortoise following close behind. A spell-casting indicator appeared on the monster's icon. It was casting mist. It's finally using that spell. Yi Si faced Lazy Blue with a sinister smile. Lazy Blue and Wandering Cloud were so focused on Yi Si that they did not notice the small changes taking place behind Yi Si. The moment they saw Yi Si's sinister smile, they knew that something was wrong. They were unable to react in time. Yi Si activated charge and darted away from between the two. The armored giant tortoise let out a mighty roar and blasted towards Yi Si with mist. It missed Yi Si, but Lazy Blue and Wandering Cloud were not so lucky. They received a full blast from the boss. Wandering Cloud could feel himself slowing down. He glanced at his status and was shocked to see a 50% slowed debuff as well as a 20 seconds damage over time debuff. He took out a potion and shouted out to Lazy Blue, "Blue, be careful." At the next moment, Wandering Cloud's eyes almost popped out of their socket. Lazy Blue was already dead. How did he die? He noticed a wound on Lazy Blue's throat and was hit with a sudden realization. Lazy Blue was at the side of Gongziyu's dominant hand when she dashed them. That woman had slit Lazy Blue's throat in the short moment when she dashed past Wandering Cloud and Lazy Blue. Having Yi Si as its target, the armored giant tortoise was totally oblivious to Wandering Cloud. It moved steadily forward, plowing into Wandering Cloud and sent him staggering to the ground. Wandering Cloud couldn't help but shudder as he stared at the huntress who was leaping around, kiting the armored giant tortoise in the process. She was just too strong. Her skills in PvE, her perfect timing when it came to PvP, and also her unprecedented bravery in faking her death. It was not something an average person could pull off. Wandering Cloud felt a coldness creeping up the tips of his fingers. He knew that Gongziyu was skillful. That was obvious since she was able to obtain so many first bloods. But while she was good in PvE, he had never expected her to be as good when it came to PvP. She was able to react instantly to her environment. The way she took Lazy Blue out. Perhaps even Lazy Blue himself did not expect her to be able to land a hit in that short time window. Yi Si summoned OL-3, which continuously attacked the armored giant tortoise's backside. Yi Si herself, on the other hand, led the armored giant tortoise towards Wandering Cloud. Was she trying to kill him the same way she killed Potato, eating Dace? Wandering Cloud ran for his life. He really wanted the shield that dropped from the armored giant tortoise, but apparently, this was not the time for him. He was the sole survivor of a 5-man party. With Gongziyu's unprecedented skill and cunningness, he stood no chance. Despite the temptation, Wandering Cloud knew that he had to run away and accept his blunder. Tang Dynasty was one of the largest guilds in the eastern continent. As long as he could get away safely. What Wandering Cloud had overlooked was that he was under a slow debuff. Yi Si caught up with him and stabbed him in the back of his knees. He felt a sharp pain and strength immediately left his right leg. Your right leg has been crippled. The act of crippling an opponent was something unique to the PvP in Fate. The system employed concepts from Chinese martial arts. Damaging an opponent's ligament with blades will cripple his or her body parts, and the only way to repair the damage was to return to one of the main cities and seek medical attention from specific NPCs. Being crippled was a status that will not take away a player's HP. However, to cripple an opponent, one must act fast and strike with precision. It was impossible for a player to master such a skill without a long time of practice. The crippled Wandering Cloud was shocked out of his mind. The crippled debuff was only mentioned briefly on the official Fate website, but the section was left without much description. He did not pay much heed to that particular piece of information. He assumed that one could only be crippled by chance, but he was wrong. Wandering Cloud stared at Gongzi. Was his luck that bad? Before he could react, he felt another sharp pain in his left leg. He could no longer feel both his legs. The armored giant tortoise had finally reached Yi Cai and was about to attack her. Was it karma? Would the huntress be killed by the armored giant tortoise? Joy soared within Wandering Cloud's heart. He unsheathed his sword and wildly swung in the general direction of Yi Cai and the armored giant tortoise. His plan was simple. It would be a great payback if he could somehow kill Yi Cai and if he was able to slay the armored giant turtle with a lucky hit. He immediately felt a stabbing pain in his arm. Your left hand has been crippled. Your right hand has been crippled. F***ck. Wandering Cloud could only curse in frustration as he glared at Yi Cai, waiting for the armored giant turtle to bite down on her. However, he didn't expect that Yi Cai would suddenly disappear. Wandering Cloud adjusted his view and saw Yi Cai leaping into the air and landing on the armored giant tortoise's back with a somersault. She held a blade in each hand and stabbed the monster's neck. The armored giant tortoise let out one final roar and fell. The system notification immediately chimed in. Player Gongzi has slain the LVL-40 wild boss armored giant tortoise with her own strength and survived the ordeal. Special rewards. Global Prestige X 8000, Chili Win City Prestige X 1000, Gold Coins X 1000, Talent Points X 4-inch. The entire Fate universe exploded into madness. Somebody was able to slay a LVL-40 wild boss when the average player level was at LVL-20. Was that a bug? A lot of them began gossiping about Gongzi and some of them even reported Gongzi to the customer service. The reply they received from the customer service was, the player defeated the boss through normal means, there was no bug involved. This statement further plunged the players into insanity. Yi Cai was oblivious to the chaos that she stirred up. She had muted the world channel a long time ago. She stood on top of the armored giant tortoise's carcass, looking down on Wandering Cloud who knelt in front of her. Her face was calm. In her past life, this man had brought her fake joy with his deceit and had used her heartlessly. She hated him. She had sworn to grind him into dust if she ever met him again one day. Hope you guys enjoyed this chapter. And please support Reign of the Hunters on Patreon XD. Chapter 53 The Past Doesn't Matter. You are listening at NovelFull.audio. Yi Cai had always felt the scar left in her heart by this man. Even after her reincarnation, she had trod carefully, ignoring any and all information regarding the Tang dynasty. When she learned anything about Wandering Cloud, she acted as if she was illiterate and could not understand anything at all. She did not want to face him. However, the goddess of fate was headstrong. She was hit by this drama in her moment of peace. She was caught off guard by his sudden appearance. Truth to be told, Yi Cai knew that she could not ostracize herself and hide from him forever. The Tang dynasty ranked number 2 in the East continent. They ranked number 5 in Country Z. Their paths would meet eventually no matter how hard she tried to avoid him. But she had never thought that they would meet so soon. How do I face him? Yi Cai had thought, thinking of the scenario when she would meet Wandering Cloud once again. With hatred? With anger? Or with meek expectation? It was a question that she had thought of many times but had no answer to. However, life is strange. When she once again faced this man, she only felt an odd unfamiliarity and nothing else. Wandering Cloud knelt on the ground, looking up at the huntress before him. Her skin was pale. While her eyes were not gorgeous, there was something about her gaze that intimidated him. She stared at him with her amber eyes. It was as if those eyes were devoid of any human emotions. They were so calm that he even felt despair as she stared on. Wandering Cloud gulped and said, "You really are Gongzi." Before he could finish his sentence, Gongzi Yu had grabbed him and her face inched closer to his. He could even feel the warm breath coming out of the huntress's mouth. It was as if tens of thousands of ants had burrowed themselves into his skin, gnawing at his nerves. He felt afraid. Yi Xi took a careful look at the face so close to hers. It was so young, so handsome. It was a face that had once deeply enchanted her. However, she no longer cared for it. When the system gave her the choice to hide her name, she chose to announce it. It was not for the fame. But rather because she had realized that the past doesn't matter anymore. No matter what she did in her last life, what relationship she shared with this man, they were all in the past. She was Yi Xi. She was Gongzi Yu. She had begun a new life. There was no point in torturing herself with something that had happened in her last life. At that moment, she felt a sense of relaxation that she had never experienced. She was herself. She lived for herself. Her joy and happiness were all for herself. Just these things were enough. Yi Xi smiled. It was a relaxed smile that Yi Xi never had before. A smile that was so warm that it could even melt the snow. Wandering Cloud looked at the unforgettable face so close to his. Coldness has always been her only expression. Then that expression was suddenly replaced with a smile. He then heard her cold voice coming out of her moist lips. What is mine, nobody else can take. Her voice was soft and carefree. Additionally, there was a hint of coldness and detachment in her eyes despite her smile. Whatever belongs to me, Gongzi Yu, don't you even think about taking it away. Not even the Tang dynasty has that right. Her smile disappeared, replaced by an icy gaze as cold as the steel of her blade. She let go of Wandering Cloud and stood up, never taking her eyes off him. In the blink of an eye, she knocked an arrow and let it loose. Glistening Snow, who had just revived, fell back onto the ground with a yelp. If you don't want to drop any items, tell your men to stay put, or... Yi Xi's lips formed into a grin. That is, if it counted as one. Wandering Cloud's eyes burned with anger. He was the vice-guild leader of Tang dynasty. Never had he suffered such a great humiliation. He had paid attention to Gongzi Yu and he had guessed that the previous First Bloods had something to do with the huntress. After he confirmed that Gongzi Yu was on the same continent as him, he was afraid that the huntress would try to steal away his most prized loot, the shield dropped by the armored giant tortoise. It was information he had bought from a certain Fate GM before the open beta test had begun with 200,000 renminbi. He had already known that the armored giant turtle had a chance of dropping one of the best pre-LVL-80 shield, the swordback hold. Since the average player level was still quite low, he was not worried that someone else would seek out the armored giant tortoise and try to defeat it. As a precaution, he had ordered some of his trusted guild members to pay close attention to Winter Hotspring. After finally getting to lie on the bed after staying up all night long, Wandering Cloud received a phone call from Lazy Blue before he could even close his eyes. He was then informed that Gongzi Yu was collecting herbs at Winter Hotspring. He was anxious, but did not pay too much heed to it. After all, the armored giant tortoise was a LVL-40 monster, even Gongzi Yu could never defeat it by herself. But after 5 to 6 hours of sleep, Lazy Blue called once again. Gongzi Yu had already started fighting the armored giant tortoise and had already chipped away half of its HP. It was at that moment that Wandering Cloud truly became nervous. He immediately arranged some of his men to meet up with Lazy Blue and stop Gongzi Yu from getting the first blood. He got off from his bed and raced to the spot from the other side of the eastern continent. What happened next you already know. This entire fiasco was all Wandering Cloud's idea. He told nothing about the boss stealing to the guild leader, night and day. He was an honest and upright person. He would be very angry if he learned that Wandering Cloud had tried to snatch a first blood and boss away from somebody else. Wandering Cloud was very afraid of Night and Day. He wanted to call for help badly, but he couldn't. He knew that Night Ande would never allow him to use guild resources for this matter. He was a smart man. He knew that Night Ande would question his words even if Wandering Cloud told him that Gong Ziyu was the one who tried to KS the boss. The guild leader had once promised Wandering Cloud that once most of the members of the guild had hit LVL 40, they would help him acquire the shield. Except this incident would definitely arouse Night Ande's suspicion. The shield was definitely valuable. However, to lose his standing in the guild for a mere shield was a very dumb move. However, Wandering Cloud couldn't bring himself to admit defeat to Gong Ziyu. He bit his lips and glared at Yi Cai as she casually killed any of his friends who tried to revive themselves. He couldn't bear to watch his brothers sacrifice themselves again and again for his sake. He finally relented, "Do not revive." Wandering Cloud's men were shocked by his decision. He was not someone who could stomach humiliation, but I already said, don't revive yourselves. Although Wandering Cloud had deceived Yi Cai in her past life, he still cared about his friends. His roar had managed to stop his men from their continuous attempts to revive. He then looked at Yi Cai and said, "Gong Ziyu, I'll remember you." Yi Cai laughed at his words. She sat on the tortoise's shell and said, "I will never forget someone who tried to steal something that's rightfully mine." Wandering Cloud gritted his teeth and remained silent. He could only watch on as Yi Cai dissected the carcass of the armored giant tortoise. Yi Cai collected the loot from the carcass with the fastest speed possible. She did not even take note of her loot. She knew very well that Wandering Cloud was the vice guild leader of Tang Dynasty. If that bastard called for help, she'd be in a pinch. At this stage of the game, she only had single target attacks. She could easily handle a few players in combat, but if more were to arrive on the scene, she'll certainly get defeated. After solving the matter that has been gnawing at her heart, Yi Cai did not have the mood to stay at this place for any longer. The past doesn't matter anymore. Not to mention that at this point in her new life, she did not have the strength to defend herself against a large guild. It would be stupid to not run away as soon as possible. As she was about to leave, Yi Cai took one last glance at Wandering Cloud's angry face. Her eyes narrowed and her lips formed into another sinister grin. She walked up to Wandering Cloud and stooped down. Wandering Cloud gritted his teeth, "What do you want?" Yi Cai leaned in closer to Wandering Cloud seductively and said in a small voice, "Floral apartment, room 612. Don't always do it in the same place. Go somewhere new once in a while." With that, she patted Wandering Cloud's shoulders and summoned her steed. Yi Cai smiled at him, "Till we meet again, oh, great guild leader," then left. As soon as Yi Cai disappeared from their sight, the people who were previously laying on the ground immediately got up. "Cloud, let's gather some players from the guild, we'll go after her," said Mu Qing. "No," said Wandering Cloud. His face was pale white and sweat dripped from his forehead. He was trembling with fear. Why? Wandering Cloud was known to be a vengeful person. His reaction was something out of his character. "I said no." Wandering Cloud roared in anger. The others were shocked after noticing his expression. Knowing that he had lost control, Wandering Cloud immediately changed the topic, "I've been crippled, carry me back to the city, I can't move." The four knew that Wandering Cloud was hiding something and it had something to do with what that Gong Ziyu had whispered to him. Nobody dared to ask. They carried him up from the ground and prepared to return to the city. Enjoy the chapter. We will also be releasing a special chapter tomorrow dedicated to a certain Jay whose talent in singing is unprecedented. XD and feel free to check out Jimmy's dank-ass Patreon here. Chapter 54 by Mo. You are listening at novelfull.audio. After leaving Winter Hot Springs, Yi Cai headed straight to Red Lake City. The wind caressed her long hair, reminding her of the past. She wasn't exactly a kind person. If she was kind, she wouldn't have threatened Wandering Cloud. Yi Cai had learned about the scandal a little too late. The guild leader of Tang Dynasty, Night and Day treated Wandering Cloud like a brother. There was nothing unusual, but then shit happened. Wandering Cloud and Night and Day fell in love with the same girl, but Wandering Cloud chose to let it go. The girl then became a couple with Night and Day. From that day onwards, Wandering Cloud had never talked to that girl. The story would have ended there. But when the Fate servers opened, the girl joined the game as well. Sometimes, things happened not because of right or wrong but because of the timing. What Wandering Cloud and the girl lacked was the so-called timing. But in Fate, their time finally came. In the end, one of them betrayed a lover, and the other betrayed a brother. This was the beginning of a shocking scandal, but also a testimony of their love. After that incident, Wandering Cloud used ECI as a tool to increase his influence. He was able to replace Night and Day as the guild leader of Tang Dynasty and also replaced Night and Day as well as the husband of his wife. All these things were learned by ECI after she left Wandering Cloud. At that time, Wandering Cloud's relationship with the girl was exposed, and it became one of the top 10 scandals in Fate. ECI was quite pitiful. She was merely cannon fodder in a larger scandal. However, looking back on it as a reborn person, the entire incident was like a joke. She wasn't unfamiliar with the fire deep within Wandering Cloud's eyes. It was exactly the fire she saw in her past life when he found his resolve to take down Night and Day. He was a man who would go to extreme lengths to achieve his ambitions. Despite not being afraid of him, ECI didn't want trouble. After all, she wanted nothing to do with Wandering Cloud anymore. She took a look at the time. It was right after the time when Wandering Cloud had an affair with the girl in Floral Apartment, room 612. It was a widely known fact in Yi-Si's last life. But in her current life, it was still a secret. Wandering Cloud thought that his secret was safe. But how could he maintain his composure when his supposed secret was known by Yi-Si? His expression was rather funny. Recalling Wandering Cloud's reaction earlier on, Yi-Si flipped her hair, throwing everything to the back of her mind. She galloped at full speed back to Red Lake City. The moment she stepped through the city gate, she received n numbers of messenger pigeon. All of them were asking about the same incident. The first blood. Yi-Si's head hurt with the sudden influx of messages. She had originally wanted to give herself a chance to face her past. But she had never thought that it would bring her so much troubles. Helpless, Yi-Si decided to go offline to hide herself. This was probably the longest period of time that Yi-Si had spent online. She was totally exhausted when she went finally offline. She didn't even care about eating and headed straight to sleep. Even Yi-Si herself did not know how long she had slept. She was woken up by the ringing of her phone. Yi-Si curled underneath her blanket as she made up her mind to ignore the phone call. But her caller was even more persistent. The phone rang and finally Yi-Si relented. Hello. Yi-Si didn't even open her eyes, her voice full of sleepiness. Yi-Si, look at the time, get your ass down here, a magnetic male voice entered her ears. That voice sounded so familiar. Yi-Si was still in a daze. Suddenly, a realization struck her. She immediately sat upright. With trembling lips, she asked cautiously, "Bayamo? Of course it's me. Is there another man who would patiently call you on the phone while you doze on like the lazy pig you are?" Yi-Si felt something flowing out from her eyes, clouding her vision. She clutched her phone tightly and pressed it closely to her ear, listening intently to Bayamo's voice. She didn't even dare to let out even a tiny breath. What's wrong with her eyes, damn it? She rubbed her eyes and discovered that her hand was wet. She tried her best to suppress her emotion, worried that Bayamo would notice something peculiar from her voice. Despite that, tears were already flowing freely down her cheeks. He's alive, Bayamo is alive. Bayamo was one of Yi-Si's cousins. He was 1 year older than her. The two had a close relationship when they were young, they were just like siblings. When Yi Si broke up with Wandering Cloud in her last life, Bai Mo was deeply concerned about her. He brought her out for a ride but Yi Si had insisted on taking the wheel. Because of her insistence, Bai Mo had allowed her to drive. Yi Si had sped on the highway. Bai Mo had told her that she was driving too fast but she wouldn't listen. She accelerated the vehicle. In the end, shit happened. She could only remember a loud bang, and the warmth when Bai Mo clutched her in his embrace. She would always remember the last words Bai Mo had said to her. Little Si, be happy. If her parents were her regrets in her last life, then Bai Mo's death was like a debt that she would never be able to repay. His death was caused by her own hands. But right now, Bai Mo was still alive. Yi Si couldn't even begin to describe her feelings with words. She wasn't even sure herself if the onslaught of emotions were tremendous joy or extreme shock. The words in her entire vocabulary were not enough to describe her current feelings. Say something, don't tell me you went back to sleep. After receiving no answer from Yi Si, Bai Mo scratched his head and said, Is my voice so hypnotic that it became a lullaby? Nope, where are you right now? Yi Si recovered from her raging emotions and asked with a smile. I've almost reached your home, but I've heard that you've moved out. Yi Si jumped down from her bed before Bai Mo could finish his sentence, I'll be back right away. You better wait for me. She immediately hung her phone and basically flew into her bathroom to clean herself up. Bai Mo was puzzled and mumbled to himself, what's with her today? Why is she sudden acting so friendly? When Yi Si reached her home, Bai Mo was already there. The first thing that Yi Si saw after opening the door was Bai Mo's handsome face. Her hands trembled. Even Yi Si herself didn't expect that she would embrace Bai Mo in a tight hug, feeling his warmth and energy. Bai Mo was extremely confused by Yi Si's sudden actions. Despite his close relationship with Yi Si, they never had such intimate contact ever since they were 7 or 8 years old due to Yi Si's cold nature. He didn't even know how to react to her sudden intimacy. It really was Bai Mo, he was alive. Yi Si buried her face into his chest, holding back the tears that were very close to flowing out. She raised her voice, putting on an air of being carefree, long time no see Bai Mo. Zhuo Xiaolan was momentarily stunned to see Yi Si dragging Bai Mo along, she smiled and called out to them, why are you still standing there? Come, wash your hands and eat. Yi Si felt as if she was in a dream. Although she was able to calm herself down, Bai Mo's presence still felt surreal. Bai Mo was the son of her mother's sister, who lived in another city. He moved to Yi Si's city as a transfer student. Yi Si raised her eyebrows, you transferred here. This is the first time I've heard of somebody doing that. Aren't you a postgraduate already? Bai Mo did very well in his studies when he was young. He had even skipped a few grades. This was why he was already a postgraduate by the time that Yi Si had enrolled into the university. Professor Xia in your campus is the mentor to my professor and my professor suggested that I should enroll in your university and thus, here I am, said Bai Mo with a mouthful of rice, I thought that I'd need to rent a room near the campus. But since you've already rented one, let's share. Yi Si replied with a hint of disdain, then what am I going to do if you bring your girlfriend home at night? Bai Mo immediately blushed. He glanced at Yi Nantian and Zhuo Xiaolan, hush, I don't have a girlfriend. Yi Si once again showed her disdain. Yi Nantian and Zhuo Xiaolan were happily watching the two bicker. It had been quite a while since the atmosphere in their house had been so lively. In the end, Yi Si compromised and allowed Bai Mo to move into her rented unit. The two said goodbye to Yi Nantian and Zhuo Xiaolan and returned to their own place. Yi Si could see a truck parked near her dormitory the moment they arrived. Bai Mo immediately rushed towards the truck and began to talk to the workers. He then shouted to Yi Si, damn it, open the door already, can't you see that I'm trying to get things moved here? Yi Si rolled her eyes. There was a saying, the dove taking over the magpie's nest. Bai Mo was doing just that. Yi Si's place was a small unit with 2 bedrooms and a living room. It was the only available unit left. The small unit was now a humble abode of 2 residents. Yi Si was exhausted after helping Bai Mo with his stuff. She couldn't help but grumble, I shouldn't have rented this place. Enjoy this chapter. J especially, and if you guys click here you'll be able to visit Jimmy's awesome-tacular Patreon page. Chapter 55 Remote Depths. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Bai Mo shamelessly pretended that he hadn't heard any of Yi Si's grumbling. He went downstairs, preparing to move more of his stuff. A large box was carried into Bai Mo's room. Yi Si stared at the box, stunned. Wasn't that a Fate gaming cabin? She had never known that Bai Mo played the game, even in her last life. Yi Si and Bai Mo were the only ones left and the movers finished. Yi Si asked while unpacking the gaming cabin, since when did you start gaming? I've been gaming for years now, but it's a secret. I haven't told anybody else, not even my parents. Bai Mo cleaned the surface of the gaming cabin carefully with a piece of cloth. Gaming is almost like an everyday thing now. Why don't you tell them? They expected me to become a scientific researcher, but I want to be a professional gamer. I know that they'd be pissed if I told them. Bai Mo tossed the cloth and leaned on the gaming cabin. He smiled, revealing his shining white teeth. Yi Si blinked as she suddenly realized something. She pursed her lips and said, You're so enthusiastic about studying here. Now I know why. You're just here so that you can game in peace. You're not cute at all. How can you say such things? He hugged Yi Si from behind and messed up her hair. Their difference between their strengths was too great. It took all of her strength to get free from the bear hug. She panted, gasping for air, So you're lying about coming here to study? Oh, that's for real though. I wanted to tell them after I've gained success in .game. With that, they'll not object to me becoming a professional gamer. Bai Mo observed Yi Si's already messy hair and ruffled it again. Yi Si slapped his hand away and was satisfied when he let out a yelp, So what's your name in Fate? Remote Depths. Bai Mo immediately gave Yi Si his in.game name. She was deeply shocked and stood still as if she was hit by lightning. Bai Mo was Remote Depths. Remote Depths was one of the top 20 metric tons in Fate in Yi Si's last life. He was a member of Tang Dynasty. His position as a tank in the guild was only second to Wandering Cloud. His skill was far superior to Wandering Cloud's, but Wandering Cloud's equipment was on an entirely different level. Wandering Cloud was a narrow-minded person. He attempted again and again to sabotage Remote Depths. Left with only the worst of members of the guild in his party, Remote Depths was still able to become famous due to his top-notch skills and good character. Remote Depths suddenly disappeared from the game one day. Even Yi Si felt that it was odd back then. She now knew that Remote Depths was her very own cousin, Bai Mo. Yi Si had received calls from Bai Mo when she dated Wandering Clouds. He had been advising her discreetly and indirectly to open her eyes and beware of Wandering Cloud. Of course, Yi Si had chosen to not listen to him. Bai Mo had called her several times in real life, while Remote Depths was one of the few people who still supported Yi Si in .game. She thought that he was someone who wanted to take advantage of her, but... What, is my name too cool? Bai Mo noticed that Yi Si had spaced out and waved his hand in front of her face. Yi Si slapped his hand away and smiled, Which guild are you in right now? I just joined Tang Dynasty a few days ago. How's the treatment over there? I'm just doing my part, I don't mind. Bai Mo smiled mischievously, I know you're playing Fate too. Yi Si raised her eyebrows as Bai Mo continued, Uncle told me. So, do you need help leveling up? Yi Si's eyebrows were even higher now. A creepy smile slowly formed on her lips. Bai Mo could feel the hair on the back of his neck rise after looking at Yi Si's smile. Hey, don't look at me like that. Say, what's your in-game name? You're a warrior, right? Yi Si asked despite knowing the answer. Yes. Hurry, clean up and go online, I have something for you. Yi Si cut off whatever Bai Mo had to say and walked out of the room. Hey, you said you were gonna to give me a hand. The thing that I'm giving you may or may not be some good stuff. If you don't want it, I can help you tidy up your things up. Yi Si's threat was obvious. Fine. Take your time. I'll finish tidying up on my own. Bai Mo was initially lazing around, but after being tempted by the thing that Yi Si had mentioned, he relented and tidied his room up in a flash. I'm in Red Lake City, said Yi Si, while heading back to her own room. An entire day had passed since Yi Si had soloed the armored giant tortoise, and the players had calmed down. There were no longer crazed cheers when Yi Si went online. She still received a lot of pigeons, most of them from friends writing to congratulate her. She replied to their messages one by one, thanking them. Lu Chang was one of the people who congratulated her. Yi Si's heart sank as she received a letter from Dong Yin. She was asking about the loot dropped by the armored giant tortoise. Yi Si was 100% sure that it was Thousand Sunsets who was asking her about the loot through Dong Yin. She began to loathe Thousand Sunsets. After all, he was in her friend list. Why couldn't he ask her directly? Yi Si replied to Lu Chang's letter and purposely left Dong Yin's letter untouched. After replying to the letters, Yi Si loitered around the gate of Red Lake City, patiently waiting for Bai Mo. A warrior in mediocre-looking armor appeared half an hour later. He didn't hide his character's info and Yi Si was able to click it open. ID, Remote Depths Race. Human Class. Warrior Level. 17, Progress. 12%. It was Bai Mo. Remote Depths grumbled as he ran towards Red Lake City. That damned girl is ordering me around again. I'm supposed to be the older brother. He was still grumbling as he walked past Yi Si. She held back a laugh and called out to him, Yo, that guy over there, are you interested in doing a quest for me? Remote Depths immediately turned towards the source of the voice and saw a female elf leaning on the Red Lake City gate. Could that be a random NPC giving out a hidden quest? Random NPCs were something unique to Fate. The system would randomly generate nameless NPCs and randomly select players for some random quest. These NPCs were rare and the quests they usually gave out were nothing short of bizarre. But there was something all these quests had in common. The rewards they offered were enormous. These NPCs were like the god of wealth to an average player. Remote Depths couldn't bring himself to believe that the female elf was talking to him. He looked around, and then pointed at himself, Are you talking to me? Yi Si held back a laugh, Would you rather that I talk to somebody else? No, here I come. Don't call out to someone else, I'm here. Remote Depths immediately dashed to Yi Si's side, afraid that she would look for someone else to hand the quest to. Yi Si immediately sent him a trade request. Remote Depths immediately lost his wits after noticing the name of the player who was trading with him. It was Gong Ziyu. This person wasn't an NPC. This person was Gong Ziyu. The Gong Ziyu that was so popular in the forums. The Gong Ziyu who had gotten so many first bloods. He sucked in a deep breath. He had never expected himself to be able to meet such a top-tier godlike player. He stared at the female elf. Her skin was fair and her silvery hair was tied into a ponytail. Her pointed ears twitched occasionally and her amber-like eyes were all so captivating. There was fire in her eyes, giving her an air of dominance. He was already impressed by Gong Ziyu after watching videos of the huntress in action, but to see her for real. Remote Depths began to stutter. G.gongzy.yo. I am AF. Fan of yours. C. Can you take a selfie W. With me? Yi Si was puzzled. She had never seen Remote Depths idolizing anybody before. To think that his first idol was a virtual character. Mischievous thoughts floated into her mind. What if Mo learned that she was Gongziyu? What would his expression be? Looking at Mo's blushing face, she decided to further stir up his emotion. It would be better if he fainted right then and there. It would be a very good clickbait in the forums. The title. The first player to faint after meeting Gongziyu. That was of course, merely Yi Si's imagination. She placed the sword-back hold into the trade column and confirmed the trade. Sword-back hold was the shield that Wandering Cloud sought. Yi Si had never expected that she would be able to obtain that shield on her first try. She intended to sell it right after real-world currency conversion was introduced into the game. But when she learned that Mo was Remote Depths, she decided to give the shield to him instead. As the saying goes, don't let one's fertile waters flow into somebody else's fields. You can always track Jimmy down in Volari's Discord server. Reign of the Hunters has its own channel there. Ping me and I shall heed thy summons. And click here to visit an amazing page. And a shout out to Meh and his series, History's Strongest Senior Brother, for reaching the 200 milestone. Cheers. Chapter 56. The most important thing is, does he treat you well? You are listening at novelfull.audio. Confirm the trade, said Yi Si. Remote Depths was still recovering from the excitement of meeting Gongziyu in person. He hadn't even noticed what Yi Si had put into the trade column. He slowly shifted his gaze to what was being traded after a reminder from Yi Si. His legs almost gave way. Sword back hold. Purple equipment defense. 271.347 required level. 0 required strength. 105 special attribute. 64% of physical attacks blocked, 52% chance of blocking magic attacks, bonus 80.110 defense, increased 20% block chance. Special attribute. All skills level +1. Special attribute. Increases mana by 10. Special attribute. Bonus 10 resistance to burn, frost and poison damage. Class. Warrior, Knight. T/N, name totes not borrowed from a certain game XD, m.miss, iiid.don't have that m.m.m.m. much money. Remote Depths stuttered even more. Hurry up and accept the trade. Yi Si was puzzled to see Mo's reaction. Poor thing, to be so overexcited because of a shield, he must have never seen a truly top-notch piece of equipment before. Really don't have that m. much money. Remote Depths' face reddened even further. C. Can y.uw. Wait for a moment. IIIW. Will borrow some m. money from m.my sister. For me to lend you some money just so that you can buy something from me. Am I the idiot or are you the idiot? Yi Si decided that she had enough fun with Remote Depths and revealed her true identity. Remote Depths was once again dumbfounded. He stared at Yi Si for a full 3 minutes, as if he was studying an alien. He then asked in a meek voice, Yi Si. What? Remote Depths let out a breath. The next thing he did was something that Yi Si hadn't expected. He gracefully accepted the shield and said, Silly girl, do you have any money? Give me some. I'll go buy some equipment. What defines a shameless person? Just look at Remote Depths. Yi Si's lips formed a slight smile. You like it? Of course I do. You're just too goddamned amazing. Remote Depths even kissed the shield. If he could hug it as he slept, he definitely would. I got this right from under Wandering Cloud's nose. If you're going to walk around in Tang Dynasty with that thing, Yi Si let out a mischievous laugh. Oh. Wandering Cloud was Tang Dynasty's MT and the Vice Guild leader as well. His equipment was awesome and his character was equally awesome as well. Remote Depth's curiosity was immediately aroused after learning that Yi Si had snatched the shield away from Wandering Cloud. Yi Si gave a brief explanation to Remote Depths, minus the part about her past life, and also gave him some words of caution. You're in Tang Dynasty right now. Don't just walk around with that shield casually. He might do something to you. Remote Depths laughed. He stored the shield into his inventory and ruffled Yi Si's hair. She slapped his hand away, and he yelped in pain. I'm not as skillful as you, but I'm not afraid of him. Don't worry about me. Besides, Tang Dynasty is just a guild, not a friggin' bank vault. I can just leave any time I want. Yi Si was about to continue her conversation with Remote Depths when she received a pigeon from Zero Arsenic, asking her to report to the guild encampment. She creased her eyebrows. She left on her steed, not forgetting to once again advise Remote Depths to not show off the sword-back hold. Remote Depths mumbled his reply and left to clear some quests. Meanwhile, Yi Si headed to the teleportation NPC and teleported into the guild encampment. She headed straight to the guild conference room. It was crowded. Most of them were people that Yi Si had met before. People like MTs and main healers from the 1st and 2nd Squadron, as well as Peacock Blue, Thousand Sunsets and Crimson Millions. There were, of course, some unfamiliar faces too. Zero Arsenic introduced them to Yi Si with a smile. One of them was Little Dan, the person in command of the 1st Squadron, and the other two were White Shallows and Doo-Doo, also DPS players from the 1st Squadron. After all of them were seated, Zero Arsenic began a short briefing about the guild's expedition to explore the Chili ruins. Gongzi, I know that you are still not very familiar with certain members, so that's why I've gathered everybody here. You can take this chance to interact with them and perhaps discuss a plan to clear the Chili ruins in the shortest time possible. The elites of Steel, Blooded Battle Spear were deeply impressed by Yi Si after she helped the guild secure 2 of the first 5. They no longer spoke to Yi Si in an arrogant manner. There's nothing much to it. Fate officials have released a notice stating that the mobs in Chili ruins have the ice attribute. I think we should all prepare some ice resistance potions. Of course, Yi Si couldn't directly tell them about the way to clear the dungeon as nobody had ever set foot in the dungeon yet. Hence, she could only remind them to create the potions needed to clear the dungeon. Thousand Sunsets immediately instructed Peacock Blue to oversee the process of creating the potions, while the others began discussing their different views of the dungeon. Yi Si merely sat at a corner, letting her mind wander. Was there any meaning to sheer theoretical discussion? The more practical way would be heading out to the dungeon in person. Yi Si immediately left the conference room after the boring meeting. She saw Dong Yin, who immediately stood up from her sitting position beside the flower bed. She waved at Yi Si, Little Si. Yi Si greeted her as well. You're waiting for Thousand Sunsets. No, I'm waiting for you. You want to go for a walk? Dong Yin proceeded to drag Yi Si towards the flower garden. Yi Si didn't decline. She looked Dong Yin up and down. Perhaps it was because of Thousand Sunsets, but her equipment was way better than Lu Chang and Yi Tsang. Dong Yin strolled around the garden with Yi Si in tow, gossiping here and there and occasionally talking about the scenery. Yi Si was very familiar with every blade of grass and every single tree in Fate. She didn't care for the scenery. She was only there with Dong Yin for 2 reasons. 1, it was already late and she didn't have the time to do anything else. 2, she was interested in finding out what Dong Yin wanted her for. After quite a while, Dong Yin stopped walking and studied Yi Si, Little Si, why are you so quiet? I don't talk much. You guys know that. Dong Yin pouted and her eyebrows creased. If it was the past Yi Si, she might have asked her friend what was distressing her. but the current Yi Si knew what was going on. She wanted nothing more to do with Thousand Sunsets. Hence, she refused to speak. Little Ci, congratulations for getting first blood on the armored giant tortoise. You're really amazing. Dong Yin finally said with a smile. Yi Si could see the sincerity in her smile. It was the sincerity of a friend. It's merely a coincidence. Yi Si nodded. As expected, it was all about that shield. Ah. Dong Yin immediately fell into a dilemma after congratulating Yi Si. Even if it was hard for her, she still had to say it. Was something called the swordback hold included in the loot dropped from the armored giant tortoise? Would Dong Yin know about the swordback hold? Of course not. Thousand Sunsets was obviously the one who knew about the swordback hold. Yi Si was stunned. She knew about the item from her past life, while Wandering Cloud bought the information from the black market. How did Thousand Sunsets learn about it? There were no mentions of the shield on the official websites about the loot drops of wild bosses. Swordback hold. What's that? Yi Si pretended that she had no knowledge of the shield. It is a shield. Used by a warrior. What about it? If you have it with you, T.1000 would like to buy it. Dong Yin's voice became very quiet. She knew that Thousand Sunsets treated her better than everybody else because of Yi Si. She was bitter at the ugly truth, with real world currency. I have never seen that thing before. Yi Si stared at Dong Yin, her voice cold as usual. Oh. Dong Yin let out a breath. She then continued, Then, do you have any guides on how to defeat the armored giant tortoise? With your current level, you must have exploited some sort of bug, right? Why you show it to me? I can pay you. Dong Yin could no longer bring herself to continue. Her face was pale and tears began to cloud her vision. At that moment, Yi Si knew that she could no longer stay in steel-blooded battle spear. It wasn't just for herself, but for Dong Yin's sake as well. She had her own values and Dong Yin had somewhere she belonged too. They were not the same type of people. If she stayed, it wouldn't be a problem for her. She was tough. But Dong Yin would definitely get hurt. 3 first bloods and 2 first fives. She had repaid her past life's debt to steel-blooded battle spear. It was enough. There was no bug. I simply kited it with the help of Frost Trap. Yi Si told her the truth. She was pained to see Dong Yin's tears that had almost rolled down her cheeks. Oh, I see. Dong Yin nodded with a little hint of gratitude. Dong Yin, how is Thousand Sunsets treating you? Although Yi Si preferred to not mind other people's business, she could no longer hold herself back after seeing Dong Yin's expression. He's a good person. Dong Yin replied meekly, she couldn't look Yi Si in the eyes. It doesn't matter if he's a good person. The most important thing is. Does he treat you well? Asked Yi Si slowly with a soft voice. Dong Yin lowered her head and answered after a short pause. Yes. Yi Si didn't waste any time in trying to determine the truth. She caressed Dong Yin's hair and said, I have class tomorrow. I'll go to sleep now. With that, she turned around and left. It wasn't because Yi Si did not care about her. Everybody had to grow up at some point. They had to pay the price for the choices they made, and pain was one of the prices to pay for someone to grow up. Chapter 57 Bane of the Automatons. You are listening at NovelFull.audio. After clearing the daily quest in Red Lake City, Yi Si saw a figure walking into the municipal building. It was Remote Depths. I thought you had some quests to attend to. Why are you still loitering around? Yi Si laughed at Remote Depths. This future top-tier MT was still a poverty-stricken warrior. I'm here to bind my city, recalling Crystal. Remote Depths chuckled. What was your original home city? Champion City. Champion City was the largest city in the eastern continent. It was one of the top 5 most flourishing cities. It was not as quiet as Red Lake City and was very developed. The city was packed full of people and of course, offered more quests than Red Lake City. The majority of the players would naturally choose Champion City as their home city. Are you sick? Just stay there. Why would you come to such a backwater place like Red Lake City? Yi Si was astonished. An official nearby creased his eyebrows when he overheard that Yi Si had described the city as backwater. TSK, yeah right. I refuse to believe that the famous Gongzi Yu would bind her city, recalling Crystal, to such a backwater place. Remote Depths snorted, sis, you tryna trick me? You're still too young. Although the official was offended, he still kept his calm and did his job, approving Remote Depths' request to bind his city, recalling Stone. The official then prepared the necessary documents so that he could become a citizen of the city. Don't forget to accept the repeatable quest. Yi Si reminded Remote Depths before leaving. Yi Si received a private message after clearing her daily quest. It was from 4Cs, are you free tomorrow? I need your help to clear the automaton formation. 4Cs was a very skillful cleric. There weren't many things that could trouble him, especially to the point where he had to ask for help. This was his first time doing so. You'll have to pay me, said Yi Si jokingly. Heck, I was afraid that you wouldn't say that. 4Cs laughed. He was not joking. I'll pay you 5,000 gold if you can finish them off with 6 shots. If you can do it with 3, I'll pay you 10,000 gold. I'll pay you 20,000 gold if you can clear the automatons with 2 shots, and if you can finish them all with only 1 shot. 4Cs continued after a short pause, if you kill them all with 1 shot, I'll pay you 30,000 gold. But... you won't seriously be able to clear the wave away with only 1 shot, right? Are you for real? Yes. My guild's progress has been hindered. 3 of the first 5 were taken by Steel-Blooded Battle Spear, while World Conqueror has the other 2 spots. They refuse to share the info with us. We've been trying to clear it for a week. But we can't afford to keep trying anymore, or we'll be left way behind. 4C sighed. It seemed that he really was in trouble this time. Even if he was tough, an excellent team is what mattered in Fate. I wouldn't have called for outside help if the situation was not dire. Can you help me out? Yi Si knew that it wasn't in 4C's nature to call out for help. She also knew that Steel-Blooded Battle Spear would not allow her to help another guild. But, she was Gongzi Yu. And Gongzi Yu wasn't a property of Steel-Blooded Battle Spear. Yi Si would be an idiot to reject an offer that would let her help a friend out while allowing her to earn some money. Sure, I have class tomorrow morning. Gather your players after lunchtime tomorrow, said Yi Si. 4Cs agreed to Yi Si's proposal. He then said, we'll take care of the mobs. All you need to do is to blast that automaton formation away with the cannons. Sure, I'll see you tomorrow. After agreeing upon a time, Yi Si went offline. She immediately went online after lunch the next day. 4Cs immediately sent her a party invitation which she accepted without hesitation. There were 2 other players in the party who Yi Si was familiar with other than 4Cs. The moment she saw the names Good Old Days and Lukewarm Water, she knew that 4Cs was from the Blank Space Guild. Although Good Old Days wasn't one of the top players in Yi Si's past life, he was still someone who could get things done. He was steadfast and romantic. He was the one who had led Blank Space to new heights. Blank Space was widely known as a neutral guild which didn't take part in a lot of PvP battles. The guild was popular with life players and players who were good in PvE. Yi Si was even more familiar with Lukewarm Water. He was the first person she met in Fate that had a poor sense of direction. Forces greeted Yi Si warmly immediately after she joined the party. Lukewarm Water greeted her as well. Little Yu, we've finally met again. I couldn't sleep last night knowing that we'll meet again. Yi Si laughed and said, did you lose your way today? The party immediately made fun of Lukewarm Water. Yi Si felt a sense of belonging even when she was surrounded by strangers. They soon arrived at the dungeon. The mobs were already cleared away. When Yi Si arrived at the spot near the automaton formation, there was already a crowd at the place. They ate and drank in groups, some of them were even dancing. It was as if they weren't there to clear the dungeon, but for a picnic instead. Good old Days stood up when he saw Yi Si. He greeted her immediately and sent her a friend request. Hi, the name's Good old Days. I've heard a lot about you Gongziyu. Good old Days was someone who would rarely take the initiative to send out friend requests. He wasn't like Thousand Sunsets who preferred to befriend any and every person he met. Instead, he chose his friends well. Yi Si approved his friend request and nodded. The elven sorcerer had a good-looking face and a warm smile. He gave off an air of familiarity. The crowd immediately surrounded Yi Si when they saw her. Some were curious about her, some were there to idolize her, and there were even 2 hunters who insisted on becoming her apprentice. It was a very joyful atmosphere. Yi Si was able to relax. She wasn't very good when it comes to interacting with people. Such a situation was perfect for her. Without offering many words, Yi Si walked towards the cannon emplacement that awaited her. To Yi Si, it wasn't something special. Every single player in the dungeon was tense as she skillfully took aim. Would they succeed this time? They held their breaths as the huntress fired an arrow at the automatons. The arrow flew straight and true, hitting an automaton at the far left. Intruder! Intruder! The automatons began to activate themselves and swarmed towards Yi Si. The group of players behind Yi Si panicked upon seeing the horde of automatons coming their way. Even if Gongziyu was very famous, they still had some doubts. At that moment, Yi Si chuckled, Forces, how much did you said you'll pay me if I can take them all out in one shot? All of 4C's attention were on the automaton. He didn't expect the sudden question from Yi Si, the person who was holding his life in her hands. He simply answered subconsciously, 30,000 gold. He then recovered from his daze and shouted, Gongzi, here they come. It seems that you'll have to pay me that 30,000 gold. As if she hadn't heard 4C's words, Yi Si jumped down from the emplacement and walked towards the players gathered behind her. Just as they were about to run for their lives, a loud boom resounded, followed by the sound of metal bits hitting the ground. System messages began to flood the screen. Every member of the party had received the achievement, Bane of the Automatons. Silence settled over the dungeon. At that moment it was as if everything had disappeared. For the 24 party members, the only thing left in their vision was the huntress who was still calm and indifferent. She walked towards the group. There was no bragging. It was as if the entire ordeal was nothing out of the ordinary. Although Good old Days was able to remain calm and collected, he was deeply impressed by Yi Si. He let up a breath as Yi Si walked up to him, Gongziyu, you sure live up to your reputation. Without delay, he immediately traded 30,000 gold to Yi Si. Yi Si politely accepted the gold. A deal was a deal. Okay, now that the most difficult part of this dungeon is cleared, I'll be on my way. With the 30,000 gold in her pocket, Yi Si was happy. She then left the party. I wish you guys good luck. Gongzi, how about joining our guild? Lukewarm Water sent a guild invitation to Yi Si who had left the party. Yi Si smiled but didn't offer an answer. You no longer belong to the party in this dungeon. You'll be kicked out of the dungeon in 29 seconds, the system notification chimed in and a timer appeared. Yi Si shook her head and said, we'll meet again. Lukewarm Water was about to say something when he was cut off by Good old Days who smiled at Yi Si, Gongzi, don't hesitate to seek our help in the future. Blank space will always be your friend. Hope you guys enjoy the double chapters. Visit Jimmy's Patreon here and pledge your support to Reign of the Hunters yo. Chapter 58. It's not time yet. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Yi originally planned to go offline until she remembered that the Glory Corporation would soon introduce the game coin and real-world cash conversion system. The 30,000 gold might seem a lot, but once the conversion system was introduced it would be a meager amount. It was not a wise choice to stock up on gold coins on that point. Items would be a smarter investment. Yi looked up Clingy Wolf and Remote Depths in her friend list and sent both of them the same message. How many coins do you have right now? The two immediately replied. As Yi had expected, they were both poor. Little Ci, you need money. I have 20 gold. It's all I have. Let me send them to you. Responded Clingy Wolf. I'll have 18 gold once I sell all these miscellaneous items I have. I'll hand it to you later. Was what Remote Depth said. Tears flowed down Yi's cheeks as she stared at the 30,000 gold in her inventory. Was there nobody else around her that knew how to make money? I'll give you 1,000 gold coins. Yi sighed. She received a reply right after sending a message to the two. If Yi did not know beforehand that Clingy Wolf and Remote Depths were in separate locations, she might have suspected that they were both in the same place. The replies were almost identically retarded. Oh, although I'm young and beautiful, but I'm straight. I'm not a lesbian. Even if you pay me 1,000 gold, I will not change my view. I'm a person with integrity. But if you're willing to add 100 more gold into the sum, I will try my best. Was what Lu Chong replied. Little Ci. Are you going to a gathering where you're the only one without a boyfriend and you need me to pass as one? Oh, you don't have to pay me for that. Your brother is cool and handsome. But if you really have to pay me, then pay me 999 gold, it's a lucky number. Replied Remote Depths. Yi had the urge to kick the two from her friend list after receiving their messages. How did she know such obnoxious individuals? She sighed and replied, I'm doing it so that you have money, so that you can have some savings, not because of something that retarded. The two remained silent for a long time, and then replied in unison, You really are giving me money. I thought you were pulling my leg. Where did you get such a large amount of money? They almost drove Yi crazy. She even thought to herself. Why are those two not bosses? If they're bosses, she would have killed them repeatedly. After more chattering, the two finally believed that Yi was quite well off and was sincere in giving them the 1,000 gold. They immediately rushed to Red Lake City. They were so excited, as if they'd won the lottery. Yi gave them 1,000 gold each, and urged them to stock up on materials that she knew would become popular in the future. They're not idiots, and understood that once the game coin and real-world cash conversion system was introduced, the in-game currency would surely suffer inflation. It would be more beneficial to have a stockpile of materials instead. The three split up, and Yi retrieved the necessary materials to craft novice Frostbane potions. Although Yi had made up her mind to leave Steel-Blooded Battle Spear, she was a person who kept her promises. Since she had promised to clear the frosty wasteland for 1,000 sunsets, she would leave after fulfilling her promise. Besides, Frosty Wasteland was the place where a much-needed skill book would drop. If Yi left then and there, she would not be able to find another 25-man party in such a short time. As the saying goes, make the best use out of everything. Even if she hated it, she still had to do it. Yi received a private message from Zero Arsenic as she was crafting her novice Frostbane potions. Gongzi, what are you doing now? Leveling up some life skills. Zero Arsenic did not immediately reply. Yi knew that he had something to ask of her, but she did not take the initiative to continue the conversation. It was never her way. Both of them remained silent. For a moment it was as if the conversation did not take place at all. Zero Arsenic could no longer hold himself back after that short moment of silence. Gongzi, did you help blank space with a dungeon today? Yi Xia answered with a slight smile, yes. Why did you not inform the guild first before doing so? Although Zero Arsenic's intention was to reprimand Yi Xia, his tone was quite gentle. Nobody would be able to be harsh towards a person who brought 3 first bloods and 2 first 5 to their guild. Oh. I need to inform you about that. Yi Xia narrowed her eyes. It was Zero Arsenic's turn to remain quiet. In an attempt to make Yi Xia stay in the guild, they did not restrict her actions. She was allowed to do anything she wanted. But just as the guild was keeping the video of her clearing the dungeon as a top secret material, she decided to offer help to someone else in order to clear the dungeon. When it was announced that Blank Space received the achievement, Bane of the Automatons, Peacock Blue was the first one who noticed that Yi Xi's name was included in the announcement. She immediately reported her discovery to Thousand Sunsets and Zero Arsenic. Thousand Sunsets was pissed, but before he could reprimand Yi Xi's behavior, he was stopped by Zero Arsenic. There was no other reason. They had not fully grasped Yi Xi's character. What if the Huntress chose to just leave in the face of Thousand Sunsets' anger? The guild was already preparing to explore the Frosty Wasteland dungeon. It was said that World Conqueror was doing the same thing. If Yi Xia left them at that crucial moment, they would lose more than they would gain. Although it did not necessarily mean that they would definitely be able to clear Frosty Wasteland with Gongzi Yu's help, the difficulty of doing so would greatly be decreased with such an excellent player in the team. Zero Arsenic was able to calm Thousand Sunsets down with his reasons, but this incident was not something that they were able to simply overlook. It was then decided that Zero Arsenic would be the one to clear things over with Yi Xia. Cough cough. What I meant was that a guild has its own system, and every guild member should have team spirit. Zero Arsenic coughed lightly to hide his emotions. Team spirit. Yi Xia repeated slowly with a slight hint of sarcasm. Zero Arsenic was embarrassed after hearing Yi Xi's tone. The word team spirit was ridiculous, especially when they knew very that Yi Xia was simply being exploited. Zero Arsenic had a strong will. But in front of Gongzi Yu, he could not maintain his composure. He let out another slight cough and decided that it would be a great idea to not further question Yi Xi's actions, anyways. Just let us know if you're going to go clear a dungeon with players who are not from our guild. We want you to lead a party into the dungeon in the following days. Zero Arsenic was truly worthy of being the strategist of Steel-Blooded Battle Spear. He managed to avoid a topic that would be too awkward for him to continue and then took the chance to restrict Yi Xia with orders from the guild. Yi Xia of course knew full well of what Zero Arsenic was thinking. But with her mind set to leave the guild after clearing the Frosty Wasteland for them, she accepted the order. On that day itself, Yi Xia was abducted to work as a hard labor for the guild. From the core players who do not have good enough equipment, to the substitutes, and then the normal guild members, Yi Xi's timetable was packed full. Yi Xia narrowed her eyes at Zero Arsenic. She did not even flinch after reading the timetable that Zero Arsenic handed to her. She only made one request. She would bring Lu Chang along. Although Lu Chang was able to level up very fast, a summoner itself was weak, relying heavily on summon monsters to fight for him or her. With her rusty skills, Lu Chang died frequently and eventually, nobody wanted to party with her, and she became the one who had the worst equipment among the 4 friends. Despite being hesitant, Zero Arsenic accepted Yi Xi's request. Lu Chang was so touched that she was crying internally. After following Yi Xia into the dungeon for 2 days straight, Lu Chang's equipment was greatly improved. Even if she was very unskillful, she made up with her lack in skill by working hard. With that, she was able to greatly reduce her deaths when exploring dungeons. Lu Chang's hard work paid off. She was able to avoid dying while clearing a hard difficulty cruel pit. Her excitement was doubled and a mid-tier fire spirit was dropped among the loots. After distributing the equipment and disbanding the party, Yi Xi left the dungeon with Lu Chang. She immediately received a message from Zero Arsenic, Gongzi, there's a party needing your help in hard difficulty Forest of Stone. Even an angel would be pissed after being worked like a pack mule for days, not to mention someone like Yi Xi who had a temper. She replied coldly, what? You're treating me like a slave now. I don't even get to rest. Zero Arsenic was a very sociable person. Yi Xi had been keeping quiet as he ordered her around for days and he was used to it. But when Yi Xi finally snapped, Zero Arsenic immediately realized that he had gone too far. He immediately said with a smile, no, definitely not. Why don't you take a 2-hour break? Yi Xi did not utter a single word, and cut off the voice connection. Little Ci, why don't you just leave? Asked Lu Chang, who was beside Yi Xi. Yi Xi was momentarily stunned. She stared at Lu Chang, slightly surprised. She had never mentioned her intention of leaving to anybody. Lu Chang laughed and said, even if I'm just a nobody in the guild, it doesn't mean that I'm ignorant. The Yi Xi I know would have left a long time ago. Why are you holding yourself back? Yi Xi simply smiled, it's not time yet. Chapter 59 The Mystifying Battle Commander. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Yi Xi's daily tasks in the guild were quite simple. In the current stage of the game, 8 5-man dungeons had already been explored. There were 10 daily entries for normal difficulty dungeons, while there was 5 entries for the hard difficulty. Yi Xi did not have to use all of her entries. What her task was to help clear the hard difficulty version of in each of the 8 dungeons once per day. The feeling of working for someone else was totally different from the feeling of working hard only for oneself. Even Lu Chang felt that heading into the dungeon was a chore after fully upgrading her equipment. She would have given up on clearing the dungeons if not for the sake of improving her skill. After 4 days of leading parties into the dungeon, Yi Xi discovered that she had mysteriously received an administrator position, the battle commander. The guild warehouse that was only open to the guild leader and vice leader was also made available to Yi Xi. If assigning her to help clear dungeons was steel-blooded battle spear's way of restricting Yi Xi, then their action this time was a very obvious attempt at buying her loyalty. What is a guild's battle commander? It could be considered as the very soul of that guild, a figure that could lead the guild forward. A battle commander of a guild was always somebody who was a very experienced commander or a very skillful player. In a fight, the battle commander would always be the focus of attention. As for the rights to freely use the guild warehouse, it's the highest benefit a guild member could receive. The wealth of the guild was stored in the guild warehouse. Top-tier equipment, materials and skill books. Everything in the guild warehouse was high quality. Even a small 100-person guild viewed their guild warehouse as something very important. In normal circumstances, only their leader and vice leader of a guild have the authority to freely use the guild warehouse. The normal guild members could only watch from the sidelines and dream about it. For 1,000 Sunsets and Zero Arsenic to grant such a great authority to Yi Xi that even Peacock Blue did not have, their intention of buying her loyalty was very obvious. Oh, Gongzi, you came online. Jimmy. No shit Sherlock. Yi Xi's curiosity was aroused when 1,000 Sunsets contacted her on his own accord, as it was very rare for him to do so. Yeah. I've heard from Zero Arsenic that you're learning life skills. It must be hard. I've given you access to the guild warehouse. Take anything you need. Said 1,000 Sunsets. It's inappropriate for me to do so. After all, they're the blood and sweat of the other guild members. Yi Xi understood the saying, after dinner comes the reckoning, as well as the idiom, carrot after stick. She knew that steel-blooded battle spear was giving her the carrot, but she had no intention of accepting that carrot. Oh, it's okay. You're one of us after all. Thousand Sunsets let out a hearty laugh. Yi Si thought to herself, if he wasn't so driven by benefit, it would be easy to befriend someone like this. Unfortunately, there was a huge gap between them that could not be crossed. You can take any equipment and potions you want as well. Yi Si did not want to argue with Thousand Sunsets on this matter. It was their choice to grant her the authority, but to use it or not was up to her. She got straight to the point and addressed the matter that bothered her the most. Thousand Sunsets, I think you should appoint someone else as the battle commander, as I'm not the one for the job. I'm not a veteran, nor have I contributed much to the guild. It is inappropriate for me to be appointed as the battle commander. Who said that you have no contribution? Who else can achieve 3 first bloods and 2 first fives for the guild? It was teamwork. Fate is all about teamwork. Everybody did their part, there was no heroism. Maybe I've performed outstandingly, but I was merely doing my part. I believe that the guild will still be able to have such achievements even without me. If you appoint me as battle commander just like that, it's inappropriate. Yi Si spoke gently. She was being courteous, but her intention of rejecting her position as battle commander was clear. Thousand Sunsets, of course, would never let the matter go so easily, and the two were unable to reach a common ground regarding this matter. Thousand Sunsets, shit just hit the fan. Thousand Sunsets' conversation was interrupted by Zero Arsenic. What happened? Our boys went to hunt for the Sandstorm Scorpion, but they ran into Tang Dynasty's players. A fight broke out. Zero Arsenic continued with a pause. Little Dan and Crimson Millions were slightly dissatisfied with the whole battle commander thing, and they vented their frustrations on Tang Dynasty. Thousand Sunsets cursed under his breath and said, "Get them to pull back. We're still no match for Tang Dynasty. We still need to explore the Frosty Wasteland in 3 days, so we must cut our losses to the minimum. I've already ordered them to pull back, but they won't listen." Thousand Sunsets' anger rose. He decided to take a look himself, and led the guild's elites along with Zero Arsenic to the sandy plains. When Yi Si found out the fight between Steel, Blooded Battle Spear and Tang Dynasty, the battle was already at its climax. Tang Dynasty lived up to its name as the rank 2 guild in the eastern continent. Although it had no first bloods, the guild very well organized and has a strong sustainability. As soon as the command was given by their battle commander, hordes of Tang Dynasty players swarmed into the sandy plains. Despite being a dark horse, Steel, Blooded Battle Spear was a new guild that was held together with money. They were able to stand their ground in the beginning of the fight, but as Tang Dynasty's main force arrived, they were slowly pushed back. At that point, Thousand Sunsets no longer cared about conserving their strength. He immediately called for reinforcements in the guild channel, promising rewards in terms of DKP for those who were willing to join the battle, and managed to hold the line. Victory will increase Steel, Blooded Battle Spear's ranking, but defeat will greatly humiliate the guild. In that situation, Thousand Sunsets had to try and win. Say, our guilds are at each other's throats right now. My guild is already giving out benefits so that our players will join the fight. Isn't your guild going to do anything? Remote Depths ran into Yi Si, who was on her way to complete her daily quest. Yi Si was momentarily stunned. Steel, Blooded Battle Spear had a confrontation against Tang Dynasty. When did that start? Thousand Sunsets was still having an idle chat with her 1.5 hours ago, and he did not mention anything about the fight. What the hell happened? Yi Si did not realize that since she had muted the guild channel, she would not know about it even if the channel is in chaos, unless somebody sent her a private message. How long ago was that? Around an hour, I think. Remote Depths thought for a short moment before asking, why? You're not joining the fight. It was a question that Yi Si did not have an answer to. She instead threw the question back at Remote Depths, why don't you go? Remote Depths shook his head, I finally have enough strength to equip the sword back hold, I ain't going to that hellhole. There's no skill involved in such battles, it's a fight of sheer numbers. What if I died and the shield dropped? It's not like I receive a salary from the guild. I'm not going as well. Yi Xi answered. It was something that she had thought deeply of. She had no sense of belonging at all to this guild. There was no need for her to join the chaotic melee going on in Sandy Plains. Besides, Wandering Cloud might still be holding a grudge against Yi Xi after her PK incident with that person. He was still wary of Yi Xi because she knew about his arrangement in Floral Apartment. What if he took the opportunity to take her out if she showed up? That was why Yi Xi decided to not join in the fight. A fight between guilds in the same continent was meaningless. They did it for honor, but it would bring more harm than good to the guild. Despite being a big guild, there were still investors behind the scenes. Would any investors waste their money in fighting such meaningless battles? The situation was the same for Steel-Blooded Battle Axe. At the beginning of the guild battle, both sides poured in considerable efforts in an attempt to gain the upper hand. But when their core members began suffering casualties, they began to slowly pull their elites off the front lines and sent in the auxiliaries instead. Such large-scale battles do not require skills. All the participants needed to do was to charge in the general direction of wherever everybody was charging. But even then, the auxiliaries were not idiots, especially those who died and lost some of their equipments, and the battle slowly died down. By the time Yi Xi got wind of the situation, the only battles that were fought between both guilds were in the global chat. Sending a message in global chat cost 100 gold coins. Before the game coins to real word cash conversion system was introduced, 100 gold coins was considered a large sum. Even if both sides were rich, the fight that got carried into the world chat finally died down. Even after suffering massive losses, Steel-Blooded Battle Spear managed to fight Tang Dynasty into a standstill. As news of the battle was posted in the forum, Steel-Blooded Battle Spear's popularity soared. Of course, Tang Dynasty would not take it quietly. Once again a battle between the two guilds was ignited, but it was fought in the forums instead. Even after the battle against an external enemy had ended, an internal struggle was still taking place. The leaders of the first and second squadron were extremely dissatisfied that Yi Xi did not show up in the battle despite being the battle commander. They argued with Thousand Sunsets in the guild conference room for hours. Even Zero Arsenic's attempt to defuse the situation failed, and they had no choice but to remove Yi Xi from the position of battle commander. When Yi Xi received the system notification, she was on her way to meet Clear Moon. She received no explanations. Yi Xi mysteriously lost her position as the battle commander, just like how she mysteriously gained it. Yi Xi, however, did not mind. She had never once done her duties as a battle commander anyways. After a few moments, she was contacted by Zero Arsenic. Gongzi, we're going to explore the Frosty Wasteland the day after tomorrow. You'll be the third in command. We'll let Little Dan and Crimson Millions try their best. If they can't make it, you'll be taking their place. Enjoy the chapter. And check out Jiminx's Patreon here. XD support Roth, pledge your support. You can always track me down in Volari's Discord server. https://discordapp.com/invite/p76axmr. Chapter 60 The Frosty Wasteland. You are listening at novelfull.audio. On the surface, everybody was from the same guild. The guild was like a warm and loving family, and its members were like brothers and sisters. But in reality, it was all nonsense, just like the advertisements shown on TV. As the saying goes, don't judge a medicine by its advertisement, but by its potency. Steel-Blooded Battle Spear had a fantastic advertisement, but its potency was mediocre. Internally, the discrimination was real. Yi Xi's treatment was the perfect example. The moment she threatened the position of an influential member's position, Yi Xi became a hindrance. Yi Xi was dissatisfied after hearing the news from Zero Arsenic. It was not because she wanted the position of the commander. In a party like this, she would rather go idling in a dungeon like this. But as a commander, she'll be given priority when distributing the loot. This was the one thing she was interested in. This was something that even Yi Ci could think of, so how could the higher-ups overlook it? Zero Arsenic's intention was to ensure that the fertile water did not flow into Yi Ci's farm. 1. Yi Ci was a huntress, and there were also other hunters and huntresses in Steel-Blooded Battle Spear. They did not wish to see Yi Ci having priority when it came down to loot distribution. Yi Ci understood the logic behind it. What an understanding child she was. That was why she kept quiet after hearing Zero Arsenic's words. Yi Ci remembered that the info on Frosty Wasteland provided by Fate officials was really very vague. They rated the dungeon as a dungeon so easy that it's literally handing out equipment to players. Was Frosty Wasteland as easy as the officials claimed it to be? Yi Ci grimaced. Those who didn't listen to officials might not be deemed good children, but trusting everything the officials said didn't necessarily make one a good child either. Clear Moon was fishing by Pearl Lake at Shuna Heights. Weren't you focusing on leveling up your forging skill? When did you start fishing as well? Yi Ci sat on a small boat in the middle of the lake with Clear Moon. She dipped her legs into the cold water. She couldn't resist the urge to stretch as she enjoyed that sheer satisfaction. I recently acquired a recipe to craft some plating which can increase physical damage by 60 points. Tetra fish scales were one of the required materials, and this place has the most tetra fish in the entire eastern continent. Clear Moon spoke softly, not wanting to scare away the fish. He handed a few platings to Yi Ci. Sister, I made these yesterday. I was gonna mail them to you, but there isn't a single mailbox around here, so I can only hand it to you in person. Yi Ci accepted the platings without hesitation. Tetra plating. Can be socketed into armors and weapons. Increases physical damage by 60. The tetra plating was a very good item. A normal equipment would need to be refined 6 to 8 times before it was able to have a bonus 60 physical damage. Factoring in the chances of failure in refining the equipment, it would cost players several hundred gold. But socketing a tetra plating to a piece of equipment could easily solve the problem. In the future, if they could start to purchase game credits, this item would be worth a lot. Knowing that Clear Moon would not accept any monetary compensation from her, Yi Ci did not bring up the matter. She simply left for Red Lake City after an idle chat with him. She then sent him a bundle of ores afterwards. Yi Ci did not receive any missions from Steel-Blooded Battle Spear the day before they explored the Frosty Wasteland, so she was free. She decided to spend her free time by acquiring some equipment for remote depths. Yi Ci contacted Clingy Wolf and invited a random cleric along the way, and the 4 of them entered a 5-man dungeon. After a day of hard work, they had quite a fruitful return. Bai Mo was so overjoyed that he treated Yi Ci and Lu Chang to a great meal. After returning home that night, Yi Ci and Bai Mo had wanted to enter the game, but they discovered an official notification that as the purchase of game credits was going to be made available soon, the game would need to undergo maintenance for 20 hours. Yi Ci estimated that after 20 hours of maintenance, it would be about 4 p.m. the next day. This timing was not very good. The initial plan the Steel-Blooded Battle Spear had was to start exploring from 8 a.m., but now the last-minute system maintenance notification had messed up their plans. She came out from the gaming cabin, planning to rest earlier tonight, considering it as giving herself a break. She had just washed up and laid down when she received Fong Shushu's call. Yi Ci, I'm going crazy. Qin Churuo has been pestering me. Fong Shushu's nagging voice came through with a hint of sweetness, exploding next to Yi Ci's ears. Isn't this good? Yi Ci grinned and said. Although she might not be able to tell what other people were thinking, she understood Fong Shushu's very well. This lass had long had her sights on Qin Churuo, but was just too shy to be the one to admit it. What are you saying? That's not what I meant. Fang Shushu's face turned flushed red. Thankfully, Yi Si could not see it, otherwise, she would definitely tease her. I meant in the game. He has been pestering me every day to introduce the two of you to each other. The corner of Yi Si's lips curled up as she said, is it for exploring the frosty wasteland? Fang Shushu didn't even try to hide it, that's right. We've been in the frosty wasteland for 3 days. We haven't even seen the first boss yet, but we've died so many times that I can't even afford to repair my equipment. Steel-blooded battle spear is also planning to explore that dungeon tomorrow. Yi Si was astonished over how secretive and fast World Conqueror was. To think that no news was leaked despite the fact that they had been exploring the dungeon for 3 days. It was obviously easier to keep students in line. When Fang Shushu heard Yi Si's words, she knew that there was no chance for her to save them, and thus stopped the conversation about the game. They then continued to have a heart-to-heart talk for a while before respectively heading to bed. The next day, after waiting very long for the system to be available again, Yi Si went online at 4 p.m. on the dot. Many of the people from Steel-blooded battle spear had already arrived, all of them in a commotion over the recent system upgrade. Previously, many of them had suffered enough as poor people, and now that they could purchase credits, almost everyone had planned to purchase some. It was a pity that even the items that were put up for auction had also soared in price, so those who were poor continued to remain poor, while those who were rich, continued to be so as well. The equipment of the Steel-blooded battle spear's first and second squadron were ready, thus they decided to move in at the same time. Yi Si was assigned to the first squadron. Since the previous experience of having 15 of them overcoming the automaton's formation, many of the members were familiar with her. The moment she joined the party, Cherry Blossom and the others immediately greeted her warmly. This was supposedly not a big deal, but because of the issue with Yi Si's position as the battle commander, Little Dan, who was in charge, was not very pleased. With so many members greeting Yi Si, his face turned cold. He spoke out, if everyone's here, let's move in. So much time has been wasted due to the system upgrade, let's not waste any more time. Yi Si took a look at the party members. Almost all the elites in the guild were here. There were even guild administrators, including Thousand Sunsets, Zero Arsenic, and Peacock Blue. Their exploration progress was very smooth. As expected of the commander-in of the first squadron, Little Dan's greatest trait was his calm and rational way of dealing with things. When there were unexpected situations, he would be able to make the best judgments in the shortest time possible. His voice was loud, and gave others a feeling of excitement and hot-bloodedness. However, Yi Si felt that his commands were a little too naggy. He treated everything with great importance, no matter how trivial it was, and had also had a low tolerance for mistakes. Although having such a commander would allow them to progress steadily, it was too restrictive and the commander was worrying too much. Usually, it would not be possible for them to continue with such a setup in a 100-man dungeon. This was also the biggest reason why even though Little Dan was a great commander in a dungeon for 25 people, he could not be considered an important role for commanding dungeons meant for more than 25 people. After proceeding on for 15 minutes and having defeated 7 to 8 groups of monsters consecutively, Peacock Blue typed in the channel, "This dungeon really doesn't look tough. Little Dan, buck up, we must get through this today and get the first kill. Don't make us have to change to another commander later." When exploring dungeons as a party, other than the commander being able to speak, all other party members were muted and were only able to type in the chat. Little Dan grinned and said humbly, "We're just starting out, don't speak too soon." Although he said this, Yi Si could sense a hint of pride in his tone. She knew that Peacock Blue's words were meant for her, but she did not feel angry. However, Cherry Blossom privately messaged her, "Gongzi, ignore Peacock Blue. This is how she talks, but she's quite pitiful also." Yi Si smiled at Cherry Blossom and asked casually, "What's so pitiful about her?" She likes Thousand Sunsets, but even though Thousand Sunsets knows about it, he pretends not to know and continues to go on with his things. She is a guild administrator, how could she not feel bad? Therefore, as time passes, she became a little. Cherry Blossom let out a sigh and said with some disdain, "It's just crap." This was really complicated. The two of them quickly ended the conversation and followed the rest of the team. Those who were supposed to just laze around did so, while the others continued to carry out the commands given. Very soon, the team arrived at the first infrastructure that seemed to be more complete and entered the desolate wasteland. Yi Si no longer left her guard down and started to treat this more seriously. It was because it was only from this point onward that they were really considered to have entered the frozen wasteland. Compared to the monsters they had encountered earlier, what they would be encountering from now onward was truly what was dangerous. Unlike how the entire party was moving on boldly, Yi Si was being extremely careful, looking in detail at every spot they passed by. Suddenly, she heard panicky cries at the front of the party. She lifted her head to see that a warrior's legs had been frozen and was made immobile. Not only that, he also continued to have his life drained because of the frozen debuff. The cleric immediately healed him to keep him alive. Surprised, Yi Si immediately called out in the channel, "Stop the healing. If the healing is stopped, he'll die. I'm the one in command now. Continue." Little Dan immediately rebutted in the channel and gave the orders. Yi Si frowned and immediately retreated a few steps. Since they wanted to court death, there was no reason for her to join them. She only backed off for a few meters when she heard a few more panicked cries. Finally able to get ungrounded, so here's a chapter, it's been a while. And since somebody had mentioned something about my Patreon, I'll be frank with you guys. I appreciate your support on Patreon. It's what allows me to translate the novel we all love, so I'm thankful for those who do support me. I don't give out things on my Patreon like others do, so I realize that when you donate, it's because you love the novel. And really, if you think my Patreon messages are shameless, you always have the choice of unsubscribing. It would be good for people to pledge their support on Patreon because of their love for the novel, not because of the incentives. But because of awesome people like you, I continue to translate. Thanks again. Contrary to popular belief, not all translators translate as a career. Some of us do it for the money, yes, but there are many of us who did it as a hobby, or a process of self-enrichment. I for one, translated Reign of the Hunters because I liked the novel, and wanted to share it with the community. I have life out there, and I apologize if real-life stuff get in the way of me translating. But I gotta respect the person paying for the roof that I'm living under. Patch notes. Frosty Wastes is now Frosty Wasteland.